hundreds of journals and papers and things like that that I would download and I'd be researching for my own assignments. And I still want to try to find a way to manage the flat information that's out there, because I don't have the ability to set up a server at home and then put the documents in and that sort of thing. I want to be able to find a tool that will let me tag them, mark them up, put them in some kind of context and all that sort of thing. And I think that's probably the next step for people who are pulling information off the net and then having it locally. They still want to be able to integrate that with everything that's on the other side of the router.
But there's so many more tools now than there were.
Yeah.
You're looking at 10 years ago, is that even having a blog, is tough, Salon, and then things like social bookmarks, which are, most of these services are free right now.
Yeah.
And you're not, it used to be that to have a knowledge management system like Cognos or one of these other things was $100,000 project.
Yeah.
And that's where you had to start. So no, we did. I remember using Lotus Notes 12 years ago. And you had to have the Domino server. You had to have things set up that way. And now you can do free WordPress.com or WordPress multi-user, or you can have set up a YAML account or a DimDim account or groups or any of these other kinds of things. And you've got the ridiculously easy group forming and all that. But yeah, I think the other key thing, you're saying about narrating the work, the other one is owning your data.
Yeah.
We talked about that and how important it is to, if you're using these third-party hosted systems, how are you going to get your data out of there? Because once the data has become important to you, let's say you've got 1,000 tweets or 1,000 posts or something like that, once you've got that, then it's too late to say, oh, gee, maybe I should migrate. Maybe I should migrate this to something else. And I think that's important. So a lot of people are, really quickly adopting these things. Like Facebook has been so quickly adopted, but try to pull your stuff out of Facebook. It's pretty tricky. Like Facebook right now, I'm told, has more photos on it than Flickr does. Right? But on Flickr, I have my photos in 5 different sizes. I can download them. I can get access to them. I can back them up. I can do all that kind of. Whereas on Facebook, they all get crunched down to one small size. And how do I copy them? Save image as or something like that. I can't. I don't think you can do a mass export.
No, there isn't an export, and that reminds me. What we were talking about with I think it was Sumit's model for managing information. I think it's that proactive approach of going into like archive and review and be disciplined enough to go in and say, okay, what am I doing with this at this point? Like, do I need to keep it? Do I need to do I need to retain it? Does it now have a different meaning because I've it's been 6 months since I looked at it, and has my interpretation changed and all that kind of thing? And that I think is the hard leap, at least for me, to be able to manage the information, is going in and reviewing it. And then the last piece of it, which I didn't see in that model, is really like what action you're going to take on it, and are you translating that into a task? Has that now become a goal, or is it just great knowledge that you want to be able to go back to at some point?
Yeah, and that's probably in the seek, sense, share of the PKM, is that there's the use part, and it's the generate new ideas, which is fine, but how do you then use those ideas? And again, that goes back to the narration of your work, is that, I talked about Follow Fridays on Twitter, and all these people posting that I'm following Mark, and he's wonderful, and unfortunately it's out of context, and what do I do with it? And so I created the Fridays Finds, where I actually take a look at my favorites for the week, and then I go through them, I make sense of them again, I force myself into that discipline, and after 2 years, I've actually have something that makes sense to me, and it's also on my own server in my database, not on Twitter's. And I think that everybody has to find those kinds of ways of balancing the flow and the stock, right? Because I got stuff flowing over me. Some of the stuff over time might become stock, might become, this is a new framework, or this is a different way of looking at things. But you don't get to that unless you have lots of conversations with people, and you test them out, and they say, well, that doesn't really work that well. Or, you talked about a lot of different tools. You mentioned Evernote today. I don't use it much, but I know how powerful it is. And a lot of people are doing that. And so it's learning from others on, hey, try this thing out, and I've done it. Getting on Twitter, we didn't figure out Twitter until we tried it for a while, and then, oh, yeah, this really makes sense because, somebody told me you better get on there and use it.
I think the one thing that that people may potentially take away from sessions like this is the difference is really trying to understand the difference between like that as you say, the big knowledge management or enterprise knowledge management, what it means personally. Where I think a lot of the success will come is more on the bottom-up stuff and being able to share appropriately, because I've seen organizations that say, yeah, we've got a great knowledge management system, we've got a great document management system, but I still don't find them really collaborative. There's a lot of work that's involved to make them happen, and sometimes they get used for the wrong purposes, and it still doesn't necessarily address what the individual needs is, as we said, to be able to get their job done, and where does the information reside, and how much of the onus is on the technology to be able to support that, and how much of it is the discipline of the individual to to embed it in their daily work. And there was another comment that I'd seen recently that said, the average the average Sunday paper now contains more information than somebody in the mid-18th century would be expected to acquire in their lifetime, or something like that.
That's why I don't read newspapers.
They're it's too depressing. And being able to have that culture where people are actually encouraged to start doing that sort of thing and take ownership of the information that they need is I think it'd be the next leap. For organizations, it'll be far more successful, I think, from the bottom up than top down.
Yeah, for me, the sort of the utopia of personal knowledge management is if everybody has their own personal knowledge management system. You've got yours, you're looking, you've got your, whether it's bookmarks, your blog, your microblog, your sharing, and things like that. And because you work in a corporation for a company, is that you allow them to harvest it. Right? And so they then harvest it and they can store it in their database, because when you leave, Mark's gone, now we still need this kind of stuff. But you also keep it for yourself. And so that what you have is a whole bunch of mini PKM that then get harvested into the corporate KM world. And so all they're doing is that they're harvesting the data, the flow, the information, as opposed to here's the box that everybody has to play in. What they're doing is like the internet, it's small pieces loosely joined.
Yeah.
And so if you can get over the privacy things, you can get over the proprietary things, I think there's a real potential in motivating people to work that much harder, because they have the sense of ownership. I think that's really important.
Well, when you talk about people leaving organizations, it's interesting because having, I've built onboarding programs and tools to go along with it, but one of the things that people tend not to think about is the disembarkation process and the offboarding process and what you do, and usually your brain dump becomes maybe an hour of, I think these are my passwords and all that kind of stuff, and knowledge tends to leave the organization. But a reasonably good structured PKM, as you say, to let it become harvested back into the organization.
That's why having a blog as opposed to email for any mass it makes it much easier for somebody else to take over the blog. There's a continuity in that, and you don't have the personal privacy issues with email. In a lot of cases is that your email gets locked down, and the person replacing you can't have access to it until a privacy person has gone through the whole spiel.
Yeah. And that's assuming that it hasn't been blown away entirely as soon as you've gone. So.
But you talked about new hire, and I wrote a blog post on new hire looking for unique practices.
Yeah, actually,
I expect a comment on.
Oh yeah, actually, I've got a couple of things I can share. I mean, they're a little bit lower level and
I think that's
tactical.
That's what I'm looking for. Specific examples.
Just a couple of things that we pulled together, both in terms of content and roadmap and
you're going to share that on my blog for me.
Absolutely.
All right.
I'll do that.
Excellent. So it's been a good day today. I really enjoyed it. It was nice.
Yeah, it was.
Fantastic cameraman.
Oh, absolutely. Excellent.
Wow, thank you.
Excellent. In spite of his enforced absence.
Yes.
Hey,
Yeah, this is now
higher call.